This episode of the podcast features the nonprofit Sleep in Heavenly Peace. Their mission is that no child sleeps on the floor. They build and distribute beds all over the nation and even the world to help combat the problem of child bedlessness. And my guest, the founder of this nonprofit, Luke Mickelson, not only shares some great stories that will leave you feeling inspired and touched by the good work that they do, but he has a lot of great advice for nonprofits or for others who are wanting to organize and create these service opportunities in their own communities. So be inspired and educated in this episode featuring Sleep in Heavenly Peace. Welcome to the Do Something More podcast, the show all about service where we highlight the helpers who inspire us all to do something more. If you're passionate about nonprofits or looking for simple ways to volunteer and give back to the causes that matter to you, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Melissa Draper. Stick around and I'll show you all the many ways anyone can truly make a difference in our world today. Welcome to another episode of the podcast, and today the nonprofit that we are featuring is called Sleep in Heavenly Peace. They have a mission of making sure that no child sleeps on the floor, and they have a lot of programs and way that they fulfill that mission. We're going to let my guest tell us more about it. Today we have Luke Mickelson. He is the founder of Sleep in Heavenly Peace. Luke, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Melissa. This is great.
Let's just start off first by having you introduce yourself and then get into why and how you decided to start your nonprofit.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I love sharing, obviously, my passion, which is the charity that I do, and to be able to be on and share it with your audience and other people out there that, my main goal is to raise awareness. Child bedlessness is so unknown that being on podcasts and sharing with other people that obviously may have never heard of it or realize how bad it is. It's just a real honor. So thank you. And so a little bit about me. I'm a farm kid from Idaho. So if you ever you go to the dictionary and look up farm kid from Idaho, you're probably going to see a picture of me there. So my dad, I was raised on, well, I shouldn't say I was raised on a farm. My dad ran a farm, but I was pretty young by the time we moved here to the Magic Valley. But, I'm from a small town. So I'm actually from a town called Kimberly, which some of your audience probably knows. And 4,000 people, and I enjoyed the pros and cons of living in a small town. You knew everybody and they knew you, and you knew too much about everybody and they knew too much about you, but there's a lot of joy and passion that comes from that. One thing that I really enjoyed growing up, which really played a role into where I'm at today, is I was a sports guy, right? I was an athlete. When you're from a small school, if you can pick a ball up, depending on doesn't matter the shape of it, and throw it in the right direction, you're going to play sports. And so, and I really enjoyed the camaraderie almost more of anything and the competition as well of playing sports, right? And when you're good at it, you have to play it all. I didn't have a choice. But that developed, this camaraderie in me developed my love of working with people, right? My love of, I didn't like to do things by myself. I always wanted to do it with a group. And so
team effort, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, I enjoy, my joy comes from seeing other people's joy, right? And being involved and working together on things. I remember my teacher in high school one time. So my mom, kind of a backstory here. My mom is a single mom. She raised me and my four other siblings, and she worked at the school. Now, when I was in elementary school, she was the elementary principal's secretary. And then when I went to high school, she moved to the superintendent's secretary. And guess where her office was? In the high school. So I could never ditch school. I always had to be on my best behavior. But she was always there. But I remember my teacher one time my mom came in, and I don't know why, she was probably checking on me. She talked about how I learned very well through group settings, right? And I developed a lot of learning skills that way. And so, anyways, long story short is I always enjoyed working with people, and then when I served my mission for the LDS Church, it just honed in on all the things I loved, right? I loved talking to strangers. I loved getting to know them, getting to know my companions. I can look back now and learn a lot of things that have really helped me both in my career, which was in sales. I was an outside water treatment salesman for a local company here in Idaho for about 20 years. And but again, I loved serving people in my church callings, right? It was
Mhm.
almost always inevitably was an activities chairman, or I worked with the youth. I taught a lot of youth. I taught a lot of gospel doctrine, but my favorite calling was in young men's. I was a young men's president, and so working with the youth, and especially with the young men, I just enjoyed that, right? Of course was a coach. It's probably not a surprise. So I did a lot of coaching for my kids, did a lot of coaching for the schools and for the little activities or associations here in the small town of Kimberly. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. I loved hunting, fishing, college football. I won't make fun of your BYU t-shirt too much, but no, I'm
Hey.
just an average Joe, I guess.
Yeah, we love BYU over here, that's for sure. Well, so how did you start your nonprofit? What was the motivation that came there,
Yeah.
and how did you go about starting that journey?
It's funny, and I don't know, I really haven't done a lot of research on how other nonprofits start. I think it's very similar. I've talked to some, and in a ways they're very similar, kind of starts in a garage, right? Well, my story starts in the middle of a meeting. So at the time, I was what's called the Young Men's President. I'm sure a lot of your audience knows what that is. I
Mhm.
tell people when I
A
do
youth
interviews,
leader for those that don't.
yeah, yeah. In the South, people might call it a youth pastor, although I'm not a youth pastor. Let's make sure that's clear.
Right.
No, I just enjoyed working with those age 12 to 16, 17-year-old kids, and being responsible for not just the spiritual growth, but also the activity arm of the church, which at the time back in the day was Boy Scouts. I was the leader of the Boy Scouts.
Mhm.
If you know what those young men president rules are. But sitting in our auxiliary meetings, of course, we were talking about members of the church, talking about activities are coming up, and talking about areas and people that were in need of help. Well, the one family particularly we were talking about, the church was helping them with rent and food and all sorts of stuff. And the interesting thing was, granted, keep in mind, I'm from a small town, right? I've
Mhm.
explored every inch I thought of this town of mine. This couple and their couple of kids lived in like an apartment complex I didn't even know existed. That's how kind of remote it was, right? And so they were talking about all the things that they're helping with, and kind of almost in passing someone said, "Yeah, and the kids don't have any beds." And I said, "What? Wait a minute. Like, they don't have any beds. Like, they're sleeping on the floor?" And she says, "Yeah, they're literally sleeping on the floor." And two thoughts came to my mind. I said, number one, I thought of my own kids, right? And I said, I was telling myself that I slept on the floor a couple of times when I was an adult, not fun. And I couldn't imagine a kid day in and day out, night after night, sleeping on the floor. Just how horrible, right?
Yeah.
And then the next thing I thought of is, okay, this is a great opportunity that I can take my Boy Scouts, right, my young men. I'm going to take an Xbox controller out of their hands, put a drill in it, and we're going to teach them some. And
Right.
all you out there that know what I'm talking about, trying to find an activity that doesn't involve a screen or a controller, that they enjoy is difficult. And so that's what we did. I came home that night after that meeting and went straight downstairs to my daughter's room, who had we had a bunk bed for her, and now it's take measure out, right? I'm measuring this and figuring this out. I was getting pretty excited about it. And then that week, I had the boys come over, and I was a little nervous because I didn't know how these boys were going to react, right? I didn't know if they were going to be happy, or if I was going to have to be a slave driver here, whipping these boys into shape, trying to get these things, this bed done. But it was quite opposite. It was actually really great to see. Melissa, you see these teenage boys. I know they were excited because of the cause, right? They knew it was going to a child that didn't have a bed to sleep in, and so they were pretty excited about it. And we had so much fun that week. Just a couple hours a night. I'd never built a piece of furniture in my life. In fact, I really didn't have all the right tools. Don't tell anybody, but I had to borrow my wife's tools. But I'm not a
That's
stranger to
great.
how to build stuff. So we just had a great time. And when we finally were done with the bed, of course, this was in about this time. It was right at the end of November, right after Thanksgiving that we did this. So it was cold. We were in my garage. My wife at the time had a salon in her garage, so I had to clean it up. So I didn't get to go on the delivery, which kind of was crappy. Here I did all this work and I was excited, but I was more excited for the boys to have this experience. And so a
Right.
couple of the parents and leaders went, and the next day at church, they just told me how awesome it was, right? And how emotional it was, and to see these kids, how happy they are, and the parents, how happy they were. I won't lie to you, I was a little jealous. I was a little jealous about it, but really, it taught me a lot of things. It taught me the joys of service, or at least providing a service opportunity for these young kids, and how important that was, right? Let alone solving this problem called child bedlessness, but still had no idea, Melissa, that this was even a thing. It's just, how many people do you know, right? That has kids
Right.
sleep on the floor, and so,
Didn't know how prevalent it was everywhere.
right, and so I'm sitting here on the couch, it's like a week later, and at the time, I don't share this a whole lot, but at the time I was going through a lot in my own life, right? On paper, I had no reason to complain, right? I mean, I had a
Mhm.
great job, I had great calling, I was doing all the things I wanted to do. There was just something inside of me that it was just a hole. I don't know any other way to say it. I mean, some people might say it's a midlife crisis. I don't know. I was like 35. I didn't feel like I don't know, I didn't feel like I was down. I was going through a little bit of a faith crisis too in my own faith pursuit, and those are always tough times, but when I built this bed for this child, something changed. It instantly filled that bucket for me, and I've done service work before, but this was different. It was just different, and so here I am sitting on the couch.
It was so specific.
Yeah,
You
and
filled such a specific need.
it was, and when it really set in is when I delivered my own bed, right? And how that came about was sitting on the couch. I could feel this hole starting to develop again, right? Just kinda getting back into, and I didn't want that. I know that that's not me. I'm a pretty outgoing, let's go do stuff, and let's have some fun, and that just wasn't me anymore. I could feel this hole developing. Let alone my kids are watching, Big Bang Theory or whatever, and here comes a commercial about another Xbox game that they want, and they know I'm not gonna get it for them, right? And they were
Mhm.
6 and 9 at the time. So a thought came to me, just the same thought I had for my Boy Scouts. I was like, "Here, I taught my scouts this wonderful opportunity to to learn the joys of service and the joys of working hard with your hands and building stuff, as well as enjoy, or I should say appreciate the things that they had, like a bed, right?" And as I just remember going, I can teach and talk to my kids all I want, but the best thing I could do right now as a father, as a member of society, as a good human being, is get off this couch, take my kids in the garage, and build another bed. And so that's what we did. And I mean, it was so awesome. I got pictures of my 6-year-old daughter in a tutu drilling away, and my son in his Boise State jersey, sand and wood. It was super fun. And the point of that wasn't necessarily to get a kid off the floor, because I didn't know any. It was at first more about providing an opportunity for my kids, right? And trying to do this dad moment, Um,
Mhm.
but then we were done with this bed, and I'm like, "Oh, I don't know what to do with it." Like, and I don't know if other charities start out with the project before the problem, right? The need. But that's where we're at. And my wife at the time says, "Why don't you post it on like a buy sell trade on Facebook?" And I'm like,
Hmm.
Number one, I don't even know what that is." But, you want me to post a free something on Facebook? Okay, yeah, we're gonna get every Tom, Dick, and Harry that wants a free bed to ask for it. And even though we did get a little bit of that, a couple of things happened when I posted that. The biggest thing to me was I realized and found out how bad this problem really was. And
Mm.
not just quantity, but like the quality of life, the quality of the bed, right, that some of these kids were sleeping in. It was too much for, I think, for any person to imagine and to think about, especially if you have your own kids.
Mhm.
And really where it sunk in, obviously, like I mentioned, was my first delivery. And I had one of the sister missionaries in my mission. We became pretty good friends, and she lives in Burley, so she was like 30 minutes away, and
Mhm.
she was up and she says, "I love your program." She says, "I've got a family that just came out of homelessness. They got a house, but they have nothing else, and they've got a couple of kids. One particular named Haley." I said, "Great, let's do it." And so, Melissa, when I showed up to there's this new house, I mean, you can imagine it wasn't like the greatest house in the world, right? But when I walked in, she was right. There was nothing. There was not a couch, not a TV, I mean, the only thing that I remember that was in the house was one of those milk crates, It had a hot
Mm.
and a can of soup, and that was dinner, right? And I'd seen homelessness before. I've worked with that, for various times throughout my life, but I never really looked at it through the eyes of a 6-year-old because that's who we were there for. So to sit there and imagine life, especially now that I had kids and I had a 6-year-old, you know,
Mhm.
what that would be like. And I first felt kind of mad. Like I was like almost angered that the situation that, this is happening in my own hometown. But then, of course, I felt sad. But this little Haley was so excited. She was excited she had a house, for crying out loud. She had been sleeping since she was born, Melissa. She'd been sleeping in the backseat of her mom's car. That was her bed.
Mhm. Mm.
And those of you from Utah and Idaho know winters aren't exactly the most pleasant time to sleep in a car,
No, no.
let alone any time. And so, I was pretty excited to be there, and she pulled me in her room, "Come check out my room," and you can imagine what it looked like, right? There's holes in the carpet and tears on the wallpaper, and, the closet didn't have a door, but there's used toys in there and dolls and stuff. But the most shocking thing, the biggest thing that really gave me pause was in the corner was a stack of clothes, and that was where she slept. That was the little
Mhm.
nest that she slept in. So Haley would come home from school, take her school clothes off, put her PJs on, and then sleep on her school clothes.
Mm.
And, to see that, and I tell everybody now, listen, I can tell you about bed deliveries. I can tell you about giving a kid a bed, but it's nothing like being in the room, and seeing and feeling the weight of that and feeling the emotion. And when we started bringing in pieces of the bed and assembling it, to watch little Haley just erupt when she realized what it was. I mean, it was the coolest moment, right? She comes up and hugs these two strange guys, right? Building this bed in her room. She even went over and hugged. I've got a picture of her hugging the bed. She even kissed the bed. Never
Aw.
before. It was amazing, right? And if that didn't melt your heart enough, I mean, I was already on, I don't know if it's cloud nine or wherever I was, to look over and see this single mom, and I was raised by a single mom.
Mhm.
This single mom, sorry, just steal 6 years of tears pouring down this lady's face, and, really got to me. I knew my mom was single too. I knew what each one of those tears meant and what was behind that. I'd seen my mom struggle with it, and, so it was more than just a good night's sleep. It was more than just a single bed to bring this family. And I remember on the way home, we had about a 30-minute drive home. My buddy Jordan and we really didn't talk or say much. I mean, it was just so overwhelming. And I finally got home, and I think the first thing, it might have been, I don't know, it felt like the first thing I told him. I said, "You know what? No kid is going to sleep on the floor in my town if I have anything to do with it." I was just angry about it almost. Um,
Mhm.
what I didn't realize is how big of a task that really was, how
Mhm.
bad child bedlessness really is. And when I told people, and still do tell people what I do, I usually get 2 questions. The first one is really it's not that bad. It's not that big of a deal. Certainly in America and not like we live in a impoverished area either. That, kids have beds. And I'm like, no, that right now, the best that we can find is greater than 3% of the total population. So, you're in a town of 100,000 people, there's 3,000 kids sleeping on the floor.
Wow.
And to kinda give you a little bit of perspective, Twin Falls or the Magic Valley really where we're at is where we cover. It's about
Mhm. In Idaho, yeah.
yeah, about 70,000 people. We've been doing this since 2012, so 13 years. We still get an application about every other day.
Wow.
So and we've delivered thousands of beds. So, it was a real big need, a real big eye opener to a problem I didn't know existed in my own backyard.
Right. Well, and there's a couple thoughts I had while you were sharing that is first on the side of those receiving this service, when you think of putting a home together, at least for me, the 2 pieces of furniture I think of that are really necessary, and it's a kitchen table and a bed.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, that's what makes your house feel like a home.
You know, it's interesting, I was on Mike Rowe's podcast, and
Mhm.
the story goes later on that, the reason why we kinda blew up across the nation is he had a Facebook watch series called Returning the Favor.
Mm.
Live anymore. He ran 4 seasons, but we were season 2, episode 9, so he came out to Twin Falls, Idaho, surprised us, right? But I was on his podcast and he says, Luke, I've been thinking about your podcast over the years. He says, you say we go into these kids' bedrooms. Well, no, it's just a room. It only becomes a bedroom when there's a bed in it, and when
Mm.
you think about that, that means a lot, In fact, I had a member of our ward come up to me, oh, this has been years back, but he says, "It's interesting that your acronym for your, nonprofit is SHP." He says, "'Cause he kinda grew up in a little bit of a rough home, him and his sister, and they'd always go to their secret hiding place, their
Oh,
SHP,
oh,
which was their
sweet.
bed." It was their bed, and,
Mhm.
think about it, how many times, us adults, especially us adults, you have a hard day at work or,
And you're
you're
upset.
struggling. Where do you go? Like, where does everybody wanna go, right?
Right.
It's a comfortable bed, and these kids don't have that. And these kids are in this situation not because of their choices. And
Mhm.
no matter what the choices are, I don't care, right? I don't care what the choices are. The parent can have $1,000,000 in the closet. If the kid's sleeping on the floor, we'll take care of that. And that was kind of my thought process going into this is you know what? And I tell all my volunteers, look, we're not there for the parents. We're not. If you are there for the parents, eventually you're going to get disappointed or frustrated. But no, we're there for the kid, and that's the joy behind delivering a bed, building and delivering a bed to a child that doesn't have one.
Yeah, it really frees you up to know what your focus is, and then you can definitely go in and be successful with it.
Yeah,
And
100%.
that was the other thought I had for the other side of it, for those that are serving, is you kinda get a double whammy here because you are making something with your own hands, which makes that increases self-esteem, that makes you feel like, "Hey, look what I did, look what I created." And then you're taking that, and the double whammy part is you get to share it and give that thing you
Oh, yeah.
created to someone else to really fulfill a real need that they have, and I
Yeah.
just think both of those working together is beautiful and creates a lot of positive energy for those that are involved.
There's I get told, and you hit the nail on the head. I get told all the time, there's just something about SHP that's brought more fulfillment to me than other charities that people have been involved with, and here's, I think, the reason why. Number 1, I mean, it's a child, right? You're helping a child who can't get behind that, right? I met a guy named Hank, and this is my Hank story.
Uh-huh.
Hank was just this old guy. So I had a build going on, and it was actually the very first time I published a build in the newspaper. I'm like, "Hey, we're Saturday morning, 8 o'clock. Come down, we're building beds for kids." So I did have no idea how many people are gonna show up for this, right? And it was still in the wintertime, so it's still cold. Well, here walks in this 80-year-old guy. Yeah, so he walks in and I'm like, "Okay, what do I do with this guy? Is he gonna die before we're" because this is not
Mhm.
necessarily easy work. And the cool thing is he was, like, handing out these little cards to people and that said, "Thank you for volunteering." So, clearly, this guy has been volunteering in areas his whole life. And so he comes up to me and he says, "What can I do?" And I said, "Well, what did you do in life?" Like, so when I found out he was 30-year-old carpenter, 40-year-old carpenter, and I'm like, I got the perfect spot for you. I'm gonna bring you over here to the saw. You know how important it is to cut a straight line. And so I put him on the saw. Now you understand, there's 60, 70 people running around. You me, I'm the only one that really knows how to do this. So you're trying to, you forget about people, right? You're just running from fire to fire and training this and training that until the build gets going. And then you can kind of relax. But I had forgot about poor Hank. So about
Mm.
4 hours later, when the build was done, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Hank, is he okay?" And I look over and here's this he already had white hair, but he was white everywhere, sawdust covered, and I just remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. This 80-year-old guy, I just worked him to the bones." And he came up to me and I'm like, "Hank, I'm sorry. I kind of forgot about you. Okay?" And with the biggest smile on his face, he says, "Luke, let me tell you something." He says, "I've volunteered my time at many nonprofits throughout the years. Never have I shown up and in 5 minutes I was on a task and I never left that task. I couldn't leave that task for the whole time." And I remember thinking, sorry," you know? And he said, "No," he said, "Thank you so much." And I learned right there, Melissa, a very valuable lesson. The happiest volunteer is the sweatiest and the dustiest.
Oh, for
And the
sure.
reason why that is because A, if you're gonna take time out of your Saturday morning to volunteer, you wanna feel like you did something, right? And you wanna be able to
Mhm.
tangibly touch and put your fingerprints, especially on the actual product that's gonna go and help somewhere, and that's what we provide. And you're being relied on, right? And it's nothing against any other nonprofit, but sometimes, whether you're there or not, it doesn't matter. But Hank, he had to be there. And the guy that when he cut the wood, he handed it to another guy. Well, that guy's waiting on Hank, and there's a guy waiting on that guy, and there's a gal waiting on, it's a team building community involved effort, and that so you're right, you get this double whammy of fulfillment in this couldn't have happened if I didn't show up, right? This couldn't have happened. And Joe Schmo over here that I've never met, that I would have otherwise passed in a grocery store and never knew who they are. They're my friend now because we're working together. And it's really fun during these build days to watch these volunteers that have never touched a tool in their life, by the way, you know,
Mhm.
to, to teach them this and then walk away and you can see them figure out the best way of doing this fast and they work together and hey, if you do this and hand me this board and mark this and do this, and all of a sudden they're whipping out headboards and side rails and stuff faster than they know what to do with. And it's just beautiful to see that, right?
Right.
Let alone then going and delivering a bed, which is a whole different experience, right? So you're right. The experience behind volunteering, and this is for any nonprofit out there that's struggling maybe, and I do a lot of nonprofit consulting, is you have to make your mission something tangible, something that people can be involved with. Because trust me, don't make it necessarily easy. We don't make building beds an easy process, right? We could streamline this quite fast. In fact, I remember we got called up to the 21st floor of the church office building. This is years ago, and I met
Mhm.
with the guy. I think his name was Tom Anderson. He was over at least the part of the DI that was building the beds, right?
Okay.
And he told me a funny story. He says, "Listen, and this is 10 years ago, but he said we went and automated a lot of our bed building process, right? What we found out was our volunteer numbers dropped. And he said
Mm.
we found out no one wanted to come to volunteer and just push a button on a machine, right? Or just to sweep a floor. They wanted their hands on it. And so they ripped all that stuff. I mean, probably millions of dollars worth of machinery. They ripped it out because they wanted, and I love that. They wanted the volunteers to have the experience because it's not just about building a bed, it's about providing that service need that we all have an itch for. And so again, it just reinforced that don't make this process simple. Don't make it so streamlined that you eliminate the volunteer experience.
Right. Yeah, we had another guest that shared that, just a couple months ago about needing to sell the experience to his volunteers as well, and not in an entertainment kind of way, but yeah, people are craving and looking for that way to give back, and when you can connect those dots as a nonprofit, the desires that people have to serve and to share, and what you can use them for successfully in your mission and goals, it can really do a lot of good.
Oh yeah, and guess what? They now become granted, I'm a salesman, remember? Your sales team, right? They go
Oh,
out and
yeah.
they're your mouthpiece, and SHP has grown. We had a megaphone with the whole Returning the Favor show, right? And I've been on other shows. I've been on Making Good with Kirby. I don't know if you know that
Mhm.
show.
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
great
we
show.
had a good we had a good time, him and I. But really, and that's helped grow SHP. I was a CNN hero. I've been on a Lay's potato chip bag. I've been a American Ninja Warrior, which is a story you don't want to hear. But
I
really,
bet your
the
kids were impressed with that one.
well, till they watch it. There's nothing like being on national TV and your gut hanging out in front of
Yeah.
everybody. Anyways, it's a whole story. But no, the growth that has happened with Sleeping on the Peace, we went from my garage to now we're the world's largest bed building charity. I mean, we're 430 plus chapter presidents trained. We're in every state. We're in 4 countries. We build, pretty close. This year, we're almost at 90,000 beds built just in 1 year. So we've grown that all almost primarily organically, right? It's someone came to a build that lived a town or 2 towns or a state over or whatnot, had the experience, felt the passion behind the mission, and went back and wanted to do it themselves, right? And so you're right. It's quote quote sell the experience, but really you're just providing an opportunity for people to do what they want to do, and really help people. A lot
Yeah.
of our chapter presidents, we have a video on our website called The Why, and
Mhm.
our chapter president in Lehigh, Utah, actually is the one that brought this up. She's like, I joined and got involved with SHP because I wanted my kids to know there's good in the world, right?
Mhm.
The media tells you otherwise, but the world I live in, it's amazing. There are millions of great people out there that want to help. They want to give back. They just don't know how, right?
Mhm.
And they want to get behind some meaningful initiative that does require them to be there, that they feel like they did make a difference. And so that's what we provide.
Yeah, for many of them, to go back to your founding story, they're looking to fulfill that maybe that hole or that need that they have to for something in their life, and
Yeah.
it's beautiful that your nonprofit can then again fulfill that need, so you're
Oh,
fulfilling needs all the way around.
it's after the show aired. Well, excuse me, I should say after the show taped, this Returning the Favor show. Um,
Mhm.
at the time, we had about 7 chapters, and some of them were in other states, California, even as far away as Maryland. But we had these chapter presidents here, and after it, we all went to dinner, right? And it was really cool. Something happened that was really neat. So Jordan, who was the chairman of the board, stood up and said, "Hey, I'd like everybody to tell me 2 things. How did you hear about SHP, and what has SHP done for you personally?" That was incredible. To hear
Mhm.
these stories, it saved marriages.
Wow.
We had a couple where they almost got divorced because he was an alcoholic, and now he fulfills his itch through serving kids building beds.
Part of
These
his recovery, yeah.
yeah, and you don't start a nonprofit going, you know what, I'm going to provide a service opportunity that's going to save a marriage. I mean,
Mhm.
these are just the byproducts of serving others, and that's why I've told it's actually written on my CNN Hero Award. You want to find true joy, you got to stop looking at yourself and see how you can help other people. And I promise you, your problems don't go away. They're still there, but they certainly don't seem near as heavy. And that's what life's about, is just enjoying each other, finding joy, finding peace, realizing that, what, we're all in this together. And that's what nonprofits should be about, is building communities. I knew, Melissa, that what well, s once I knew that child bedlessness was as big as it really was. I knew it wasn't in my own hometown. I was getting calls from all over the country of,
Mhm.
"Hey, need a bed for my kid." Talk about tear your heart out when you can't do anything, right? But
Mhm.
I knew building beds in Idaho, just in my little small town, was never gonna be enough, right? If we were really gonna make a dent in child bedlessness, I knew, and this is where my entrepreneur background came in, right? I knew I had to develop a process and a platform that people could replicate what we were doing in Twin Falls. And so that's what we did, now because of that, we can take any Joe Schmo. Trust me, if I can do it, anybody can. You can find out whether you have a chapter in your own area. If you don't, then we have a process and a training program that teaches people how to be a chapter president, right? We fly them to Lehigh, Utah, and they come in for a weekend, and we teach them the ins and outs of running a nonprofit. And and it's beautiful to see these otherwise just common schmoes, right? School teachers and whatever. These people that work, especially work in the field of children. They see it. They know the need. Whereas otherwise, you don't until you start asking the questions. And it's beautiful to see these people flourish. And we'll take guys that I've had a couple of guys say that they were just introverted, right? They don't really like to talk to people, and they're the guy holding up the wall in the background, right? And now
Mhm.
they're doing newscast reviews and podcasts, and
Mm,
they,
that's
they said,
great.
"Luke, I would never in a million years think I'd be standing in front of a camera." He says, "But I can't talk enough about what SHP has done for my community, what it's done for the kids that we serve, and especially what it's done for me personally."
Yeah, a little fire for so many people.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, and I love that you mentioned you're all over now, you have chapters all over, and it sounds like there's various ways people can get involved, either in participating in one of these big builds that you do or even delivering the beds themselves, is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely. If this is something that really, pulls at your heart or you wanna get involved and find out, there's a bunch of ways to do it. The first thing you can do is just go to our website, which is shpbeds.org. Now, we're a little unique. Our website, you're not gonna go to just our main page. What's gonna come up is actually geosynced to your location, right? So, you're
Mm,
gonna find the chapter that's closest to you, right? So, if you're down in Provo, it's gonna bring up the Lehigh chapter. And the Lehigh chapter, you're gonna see the beds that they've delivered, right? The numbers, you can see the waiting list that they're on, which grows all the time, right? You're gonna find ways to connect with them via either email the chapter president. There's a phone number you can call. You can go to you can see their social media links. Each chapter has their own little social media links and learn about what they've done, maybe what's coming down the pipe that you can be involved with. So there's ways to get involved that way. Now, if you don't have a chapter in your area, and this is something you really, really feel strongly about, maybe you've learned that child bedlessness really is a thing in your own town, then you can start a chapter, right?
mm,
There's a whole process of doing that. We contact you many
mhm,
times and make sure our goal is to make sure you understand all that's involved so you're not blindsided because it is work. I mean,
right.
it can be time consuming, but it can be very, very addictive, by the way.
Yeah, very
Um,
rewarding, yeah.
Very rewarding, that's right.
That's
And
good.
then, of course, we're nonprofit, we work off donations, you can donate money to and the beauty of listen, when I didn't start this to be a nonprofit, this was just a family Christmas project, right? The minute we were becoming gonna be a nonprofit, just because I couldn't finance it myself anymore, I was like, "Listen, I don't wanna be one of those nonprofits that you donate money to, you have no idea where it goes, right? You just pray it goes to people to help you locally, right? And this is a community
Mhm,
problem. It needs to be solved by the community. That means community dollars. So the way we have set it up, it's extremely transparent. It's extremely simple. And you'll recognize how this works. We pull 10%. That's it. So when you donate $100 or $1,000, you get to pick which chapter in the whole world, which chapter you want to donate to it. 90% go there. And of the 10%, I like to say this, still helps that chapter exist, with insurance and registration that they would otherwise have to pay for themselves. We paid for that.
right.
We, as in, the corporate, if you
As
will,
a nonprofit, yeah,
as the
mhm,
nonprofit, we're still a business. You still have to have
right.
overhead.
Gotta
Um,
cover all those
it actually,
things.
Correct, and it actually comes up to 96% of your dollar goes to the program, but more importantly, the program in your own hometown, right? And so the beds stay there, the dollars stay there. So I like to share that
That's great.
because when you donate your money, you want to pick a nonprofit that is going to help the people, the neighbors next door, right? And that's the way I set it up. And if you can't or you have and you're still looking for other ways, the probably the biggest ask I have of your audience is just share. Let people know that bedlessness is a real thing. We're the largest in the world, Melissa, not because of really mostly because there's not a lot of charities that do this. When I decided to be a charity, I of course went to the internet and scoured looking for other nonprofits that build beds. I was going to get some ideas. I found
Nothing.
one. I found one. Of course, this is back in 2013, but I found one in Charlotte, North Carolina, and they don't even really build beds anymore. So it was such a need, and it really shocked me as I started talking with other service organizations like CASA, foster care, Child Protective Services, all these organizations. They loved us. They loved what we were doing, and I found out why. Because when it comes to transitioning homelessness, CASA, kids coming out of foster care or even going into foster care, the one of, if not the top hardest thing for them to go get and to find is a bed for a child. Who would
Mm.
have known? I had no idea.
Yeah.
You know, there's an organization called Care Portal, much like Just Serve. Care
Mhm.
Portal, if you're familiar with them, they do the same thing. They take any service that someone needs and they put it in this little machine and they help people locally connect them, right? Their number one request is a bed for a child. That's
Wow.
nationwide. So it just goes to show you, your audience know that this is a problem. It really is existing, and it's so unknown. Like, I bet you most of you right now are maybe the first time realize, "Oh, it's really that bad,
Mm.
huh?" And it
That
really is.
prevalent. Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's admirable that you've found that specific need to fulfill, and you've obviously really organized it and been efficient with the ways that you can help as many as these kids as possible. And Luke, it's just been a great conversation today, getting to know you and more about your nonprofit.
Oh, thank you. Again, thanks for having me. I mean, this is how we grow. We touch the hearts of those that have this kind of passion, and not everybody has this kind of passion for this kind of need, and that's fine. That's okay. Do something. Go and help somewhere. I do a lot of keynote speaking, and my speech is about tiny moments and acting on tiny moments. And you know, how many times in life do we have these fleeting thoughts that come into our brains and ask us or encourage us to do even just the littlest tasks, and oftentimes we just excuse those away. We don't have time, or we're too busy, or it's meaningless, or that's not going to really do anything. And you know, I had that tiny moment, and I'm just super grateful that I just had the right moment in time or whatever to get off the couch and do something, because now we have served over 350,000 kids, even just since 2018. And that's horrible. It's horrible that there's that big of a need, but it's beautiful that there's that big of um, a volunteer base that wants to solve it. So, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That concludes my interview with Luke Mickelson, the founder of Sleep in Heavenly Peace. I will leave links in the show notes to their website and other things that he mentioned, so you can go and learn even more about the good work they're doing and how you can continue to get involved. And I want to give the friendly reminder that if you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, you learned something beneficial from it, please share it with a friend or someone else you think would benefit from the good things that we talked about here today. And as always, I will appreciate your 5-star ratings or reviews on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to this podcast. And of course, this week, I hope that you can find a way to do something more to help lift, inspire, or make a difference.